Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Donna Cameron. Donna is the author of A Year of Living Kindly, Choices That Will Change Your Life and the World Around You. Now, in A Year of Living Kindly, Donna is using stories, observation, humor, and summaries of expert research. And she shares her experience committing to, believe this or not, 365 days of practicing kindness. She presents compelling research into the myriad benefits of kindness, including health, wealth, longevity, improved relationships, and personal and business success. She explores what a kind life entails and what gets in the way of it. And she provides practical, experiential suggestions for how each of us can strengthen our kindness muscle. And you know something, this is something I think is very relevant today. And hopefully Donna's going to share more about this with us, because by choosing a life of kindness, it becomes easier and more natural for us. Now, A Year of Living Kindly has received numerous awards and recognition, and we'll let Donna talk a little bit about that. But needless to say, she has spent her career working and really focusing on making a difference in people's lives. So, without further ado, Donna, welcome to the Success Insight podcast.
Thank you, Howard. It's so nice to be with you. I appreciate your inviting me to be a part of your podcast.
Fantastic. Well, I have to say, A Year of Living Kindly and this whole idea of kindness, I cannot think of is kindness a behavior? Is it an action? What is it? Because heaven knows we need more kindness in the world right now. Tell us a little bit more.
We do. Well, I would say kindness is a path. It's a way of choosing how to live your life. I think of kindness as a verb. It's being intentional about the interactions we have with one another and aiming to make those positive and to manifest the world that we hope to live in. I do have to say, I started my Year of Living Kindly in January of 2015. It was a very different world then, and things changed a lot by the end of that year. And I think kindness is needed more than ever right now.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I'm curious. So back in 2015, and you alluded in 2016. So it's literally 4 years ago. I'm thinking of an election cycle. I mean, for me, what was the kind of the spark, the ember that took off for you for why you needed to pursue this Year of Living Kindly?
I've always been drawn to kind people and really been awed by what a powerful force kindness seemed to be. My career was in the not-for-profit sector. So for years, I saw the difference kindness makes when people get together and for a cause or for a trade or their professional association. But as volunteers, I've just seen kindness in action and really seen what a difference it makes. And then when I've been around kind people, you just feel so good around them. So for years, I would set an intention of being a truly kind person. And it's not that I was unkind or anything like that, but I think I mostly settled for nice. So my intentions then would sometimes fade because I had a busy life and a busy career. And so I would forget that I really want to commit to kindness. And so at the beginning of 2015, I decided to really make that commitment and to hold myself accountable. I started a blog and decided I would blog about kindness. I certainly didn't want to write about what I'm doing and look at me and see what a nice thing I did today, but I'm very nerdy. So I like research, and there's been a lot of research in recent years about the benefits of kindness. So in addition to talking about my own attempts to live a kind life, I also shared what I was learning about the science of kindness. And I figured if I blogged about it and I invited friends to follow the blog, if by the Ides of March I had sort of faded in my intention, it would be very noticeable. That commitment really held me accountable, and I continued throughout the year. By about the Ides of March, though, I realized that it wasn't going to be a 1-year commitment. And then the next year I would make a commitment to learning how to salsa dance or cook Italian food or something. I saw early on that this is something I wanted to commit to for my whole life.
That is a wonderful introduction into this path you've taken. And a couple things kind of dawned on me. And one of the things you said early on is, the difference between kindness is you use the term don't settle for nice. Because, if I'm, kind it's an act that we can live and make a choice and discover ways we can find to be kind every day for ourselves. We have to be kind to ourselves, our family, our friends out in the community. And I really loved how you said that, don't settle for nice. I have a guest, she is a recurring guest on my podcast, Mindset Monday, Andre Martin. She's a golf pro and a mindset coach, and she uses a metaphor of go for the gold, don't settle for second best, which is silver. And that mantra is repeated almost every episode that we do together. And I love this package that you've just given us, which is don't just settle for nice, because perhaps nice is just in the moment, but settle for the long journey, the lifelong journey of being kind. It's much more powerful. And I'm curious, too, are you familiar with the work of Brené Brown?
Oh, yes, definitely.
She uses the term in one of her earlier books, I think it was Daring Greatly, perhaps, of living life wholeheartedly, wholehearted living. And I'm curious then, with kindness, what did you first discover about it? Is this something that it just comes natural? Is it taught? How does it begin to show up and manifest itself?
Well, I think there are some people for whom kindness is just the air they breathe and it's totally natural. And those are probably not people who would need to write a book about kindness or need to make a 1-year commitment to it because it's how they live their life. But I think for most of us who sometimes get snarky and grumpy and oblivious, kindness is a choice that we make. And the more we practice some of the skills of kindness, the easier that choice is to make. And eventually it becomes a default setting. But you mentioned Brené Brown, and a lot of her work is on vulnerability. And I think kindness is something that makes us vulnerable. That's one of the differences between kind and nice. And in my view, I think there are probably people who see them as the same and it's a matter of semantics. But I think there's really a vast difference in that nice doesn't ask us to take a lot of risk. It's safe. It's doing the polite thing, the thing that's expected, but it's not necessarily going out of our way to have a good interaction or to help someone. It doesn't ask me to take any risk, where kindness does. It asks me to suspend judgment about people. It asks me to really care about what the other person is getting out of our interaction. And it asks me to risk having my kindness rejected or misunderstood. There's an unknown quantity there when we step into kindness. We might do it clumsily, or we might look awkward or embarrass ourselves. Maybe we'll call unwanted attention to ourselves. It makes us vulnerable. And I think that means it also takes courage. As I think I said earlier, I see kindness as a verb. It really asks me to jump in, to offer my assistance without being asked, and to be intentional about the experience that I'm having with someone. If I were to sum up kindness in 2 words, they would be extend yourself.
There is a short little video that's going around in Twitter these days, and I know you have a Twitter handle, Donna J. Cameron. We'll get that in our show notes, the link to your Twitter account. There's a short video of this black man he's wearing his mask. He's in, I think, a Target store. He's wearing a pink shirt, and there's a young lady at the cash register, and it's apparent that she doesn't have enough money on her credit card, or her credit card got denied, and she didn't have enough money in the wallet to make the purchase. And the thing she gave up was the bag of diapers, which is for her child. I think the man's attention was getting piqued because of the conversation, and he eventually went to the cash register and gave the clerk, here's my credit card, I'll take care of this. It turned out to be a social study because they interviewed the man afterward. And I'm kind of drawn by some of your statements. It's just kindness requires risk, it requires stepping up and perhaps getting out of your comfort zone and then some. And I'm wondering, I don't know if you've seen this video.
I haven't, no.
That strikes me, though, as that's an example of being kind. That's not just being nice.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yes. Kind things can be really easy to do, but most of them are also really easy not to do. I mean, it would certainly be nothing out of the ordinary for people all to just stand there and watch this interaction and maybe think to themselves, oh, that poor woman, it's too bad she doesn't have enough money. But stepping out and offering to pay, that's kindness. That's going outside one's comfort zone.
What are some of the findings that you discovered as you were researching for the book, becoming intentional in your endeavor to display kindness or to make that choice of showing up with kindness? What are some of the observations you discovered?
I think most of the skills of kindness are really easy things. They're things that anybody can do, but we often don't do them. Things like learning to pause. I would say that's probably the biggest skill of kindness. And it sounds like such a simple thing, but it's not. So many of us, we respond automatically. Someone says hello to us, we say hello back. Someone smiles, we smile back. Someone is rude to us, we're rude back. Learning how to pause is an incredibly powerful skill. It gives us a chance to think about maybe there's something behind somebody's bad behavior, or maybe they're frightened and that caused them to lash out, or maybe there's a misunderstanding. And it also gives us an opportunity to decide who we want to be. Just because somebody else may be acting like a jerk doesn't mean we should. I like to think that a pause gives us the gift of grace. And that's just one of the skills of kindness. I think another one is learning to withhold judgment about people. I think they say we make judgments about people in 3 to 5 seconds of meeting them, and we do it on how they talk and how they dress and, maybe what the slogan is across their t-shirt or whatever. Sometimes people say things and they wish they hadn't. They wish they could take it back. Or sometimes we say something or we act inconsiderately and we hope that people are giving us a pass because that's not who we really are. And we need to withhold our judgments too and give people the benefit of the doubt. Related to that is curiosity. If in that pause that we take the time to think about what might have motivated someone to say something or behave inappropriately, maybe we'll see that there could be another possibility. If we tap into our curiosity, we may think that maybe something else is going on in that person's life that has brought them to the edge and has really stressed them, or maybe they misunderstood. So curiosity is another path to kindness. And they're just practices that we can engage in that if we will remind ourselves to do it and practice them, practice is really essential here. Other ones are paying attention. I think most of us are often caught up in our devices, our smartphone or whatever screen we're looking at, and we don't necessarily notice what's going on around us. Or maybe it's not our devices, maybe it's the internal drama that we're carrying around in our head. If we pay attention to what's happening around us, we'll notice that a mom is struggling to get her stroller through a door, or somebody is having trouble carrying all their packages, or maybe a child is acting out and would just like some attention, or on the highway where a lot of people tell me that's where they are at their worst behavior. Somebody's trying to merge. All those things just require us paying attention.
I can imagine as you were researching for the book and beginning to write it, you had a lot of different stories from a lot of different people. As you began to bring this book to its fruition, how did you envision taking this information and beginning to share it with organizations, with people, scholarly venues? How did you begin to coach or highlight for others the power of kindness, and what was the reception there?
Well, I didn't start out to write a book. My intention originally was just to make that year-long deep dive into kindness. So I blogged once a week, and over the months, my blogging community, people who were subscribing to the blog, kept growing, and I was having wonderful conversations with people. It was such a kind community, and people were sharing their experiences, and we had questions and went back and forth in conversation on the blog. And then as I got toward the end of the year, people started saying, I hope you're not going to stop this at the end of the year. And why don't you turn this into a book? So that's when I had written one other book. And I've always been a writer. So, it seemed like a natural. And I sort of thought, well, why didn't I think of that? But one of the things that sort of made me hesitate was when I did start talking to agents and editors about the possibility of the book, they would refer to it as self-help. And Howard, I'm not crazy about that term self-help.
I noticed, and for our listeners, Donna's received many awards for this. And that's the one thing that got jumped out at me. The category self-help motivation. I get personal growth, but self-help. Tell us more about that, why you struggle with that.
Well, as it turns out, self-help is the umbrella category that a whole lot of books fall under. But I've always found, and there are some wonderful, wonderful self-help books. For example, Brené Brown's, I love her books, and they're in that self-help category too. But so many self-help books I've read over the years, when I read them, it's like the author thinks they have found the one true path to whatever it is, whether it's wealth or happiness or security or whatever. And if the reader will just follow their path, then they will have that same experience. And I don't think it works that way. I mean, certainly there are some wonderful self-help books and books I've read and reread that are wonderful, but I think what we get out of them is what we need or what we're looking for. It's not, I'm going to replicate this author's path or do this, follow it like a recipe. So as soon as I realized I didn't have to approach this as an expert and I didn't have to tell people how to live, then I saw sort of a direction and structure that I wanted the book to take. I wanted to share what I had learned about kindness and the skills that I was trying to develop and what I was learning about the benefits and the barriers and the hows and the whys of kindness, and hope that readers would say, oh yeah, this really fits for me. This is something I want to do. And maybe there would be some other thing that would say, well, this maybe at another time in my life, this will be important. But I just didn't want to write a book where I was claiming to be the kindness expert. And, if you just follow my path, you'll have a perfect life, because I don't think that's how it works.
I have to share, and I so totally resonate with what you have just expressed, because as a coach, there are so many theories, assessments, tools. As many of the theories are evidence-based, but coaches have a habit of repackaging it and offering it. This is my own. I found this. Blah blah blah, and it's like, no, you didn't. And this is just another flavor of vanilla, another variation of vanilla. And as a coach, I don't know, perhaps it's the left brain side of me, because I'm very data oriented, objective. And it's like, I've heard this before. And I love how you essentially gave yourself permission not to have to go down that path and to write, and that so many others have, and kind of create this idea of taking kindness and discovering the elements of it for yourself, and then being able to develop the following, the people who are very passionate about the topic that you're presenting, and then finding ways to give back to organizations, to individuals, so that they can discover the benefits of kindness. And I'm curious, now that the book is out, you published the book, how did you begin to then take this message of what you've learned, and who has been on the receiving end of this body of work that you've produced, and how have they begun to make changes in their own self or within their organization? Do you have any stories you can share there?
Well, there have been a few businesses or organizations that have invited me in to work with their employees or their members because kindness is something that they wanted to see more of in their organization. There's been a lot of research about the benefits of kindness in the workplace, of increasing employee retention and employee satisfaction and making a more productive workplace and more profitable workplace too. So there are all sorts of benefits of kindness as well as on the health side. So people, I think, wanted to hear about that and then have discussions for themselves about if we're going to make our workplace kinder, how can we do that and make it a decision that the whole group talks about together? I think for some, it's been a matter of getting over the feeling that kindness is weak, that it's, yeah, I remember I was on a plane once and talking to my seatmate, and I think somehow I mentioned that I was working on a book about kindness, and I swear I thought she was going to pat me on the head. She just said, "Oh, that's so sweet." And, kindness isn't sweet. I suppose it can be, but it really is something that takes courage and it takes intentionality. And kind people aren't pushovers or weak or anything like that. And I think sometimes it's just having that conversation as a group or a business or a family or friends about how can we live kindly and also, make a difference in the world, live our political values, our other values. It doesn't mean we have to acquiesce to unkindness or to rudeness, not by any means at all.
I have a colleague that I've worked with over the past couple of years. He's been on our podcast as well, and he uses a phrase of being truthful and kind. And it's funny because as I'm researching for this podcast, preparing the notes and learning more about you and your work and in the book, I'm reminded, and I'm using this phrase during a weekly webinar that I give for individuals in career transition, is because I'm reviewing their LinkedIn profiles. And I always tell people I'm going to be truthful, but I'm going to be kind. And I want you to know that I need to give you the truth about how I feel about your profile, because I want you to make it better. So don't take any offense by it, which therefore that's the kindness aspect is, I'm not going to cut you off at the knees, but I'm going to give you some suggestions, some criticisms that I think you can then take and build from there. And it's very interesting, the comments you made about the woman in the seat. And I can hear that. There's a term they use down in the South. I don't know if that's special or that's so special, something like that, but it's somewhat condescending, I think. I don't know.
Bless your heart.
Bless your heart. That's it. That's it. And it seems to me that, I get that displaying kindness, showing up, being kind, can be looked upon and interpreted as weakness, as vulnerable. It also seems to me that it can be interpreted as, in some ways, people don't want to perhaps embrace kindness because maybe they're fearful of it in some ways. And is that an emotion that individuals would feel? Because if I show kindness, I fear that I may be looked upon as being too vulnerable. And, we're afraid of being looked at as being invulnerable and embarrassed.
I think that's true. I think there are people who fear that if they're kind, they'll be perceived as weak. I remember a gentleman I worked with years and years ago at one of my first professional jobs. His philosophy was what he called IO, or instant offense. And he would just always put the other person on the defensive and try to make them feel weak. And it was such an unkind thing to do. But I think he was really afraid of being seen as anything other than a really strong, big guy. Where I've come to see that the strongest among us are the people who are able to be kind and even be kind when they're being faced with being kind when it's hard. I think unkind people don't even understand that that's possible to do.
Just dawned on me as you were sharing that, and the example of this gentleman. I'm reminded of the work of Patrick Lencioni, and I don't know if you've read any of his work, but very much a leading thinker in the area of team development, team coaching, and he wrote a series of books. The most famous of which is the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and the dysfunctions are, one is trust, and this is where the vulnerability comes from. As a leader, if they don't have what he calls vulnerability-based trust, he or she can never really truly be a great leader. And the teams that they're responsible for are never going to be high-performing teams because they're going to be afraid to share their fears, their vulnerabilities with each other. And it's not the type of vulnerability that I'm afraid of death and taxes, okay? But it's vulnerable. I'm afraid of being wrong or not knowing the right answer. And I think if we as leaders can demonstrate this vulnerability, this trust, demonstrate this kindness, that it's okay to demonstrate kindness. And it gets back to my friend again, being truthful and kind. I think you can help yourself and your team, rise above the murkiness or the danger zone, for sake of better words. And there's so much more possibility if we can embrace this path of being kind.
I think you're so right. You mentioned trust, and I think kindness is a really big connector with trust, especially in the workplace. If an employer is kind, when they're reprimanding or correcting an employee, and other employees see that, then they feel safer. They trust that employer has their back, and they're willing to take the risks that sometimes go with innovation and collaboration and making great strides. But if they're afraid that anything they do is going to cause somebody to jump on them, they're not going to take those chances and help the organization grow to that next level.
If we were going to coach, mentor, teach, facilitate discussions about kindness and perhaps the ancillary acts of being truthful, being vulnerable, where do you feel is the best place and age that we should start to have these kinds of conversations?
Well, I think we should start with children as young as possible. If we want to see civil behaviors, if we want to see kindness, we have to model it. And it's one thing to tell children to be kind, but if they don't see it, if the parents are saying, oh, no, you need to be kind to all your friends, and then they see their parents bad-mouthing the neighbors or calling the driver in the car in front of them a nasty name or something, it's not going to stick. I think we all learn what we see rather than what we're told. So as far as where to start, I would say start in childhood. But it's just a matter of modeling the world we want to live in. If we want a kind world, we need to do our part to create that world. One of the things that that I found in my research was that both unkindness and kindness are contagious, literally contagious, just like a virus, just like COVID-19. If we experience unkindness, or even if we just witness it, it's a catalyst for us to be more unkind in our next encounters. And then kindness works the same way. If we experience it, if we witness it, if we're the giver or the beneficiary of a kindness, we're more likely to be kind in our next encounters. So we can create an epidemic by what we choose. I think right now the epidemic is leaning toward incivility and unkindness, but we can turn that around. It's just a matter of more of us being willing to be that vulnerable and make the kind choice when we have a choice.
As you were offering this insight, I was actually thinking really the Black Lives Matters movement and the activities that are going on and just this incivility and I agree. if people see this unkind act, then it's almost as though it gives them permission to also be unkind. And I also love, by the way, that you suggested that this needs to start as far back as with children and the parents, and parents modeling the way. Because I think this adage, our children are our future, it's very true, because as adults, many of our peers, our adult peers, perhaps haven't taken that to heart. and we could see what we're in the times we're living in right now. What kind of hope, and I've been asking this question a lot of a number of my guests, is what kind of hope do you have for our future? I mean, you have this wonderful work. This you've done the research about the power of kindness and how, the development of it, and how we can begin to learn it, and learning to pause. And by the way, I did notice when I would ask a question, there would probably be a 10 or 15 second pause there. I did notice that, by the way, Donna, I want to tell you. But what hope do you have?
Well, it depends on the day. Sometimes it's hard to have to be really optimistic, but overall, I really am hopeful. I think kindness is powerful, and it's going to prevail. Last year, I was invited to go speak to some high school kids at one of our local high schools, and they have I can't remember what they called the committee, but it was a committee focused on fighting bullying, spreading kindness, making sure everybody is included. And it was a very diverse school with lots of immigrant teenagers, and they really wanted to have deserve a reputation for kindness. So there were about 40 kids in this committee, and I went and talked to them, and it was so uplifting, and they were just determined that they were going to make the world kinder. But I have to tell you, and you've said something that reminded me of this, toward the end, one of them raised their hands and said, our class advisor talks about kindness. We talk about kindness whenever we get together. We really are making an effort to show why bullying is bad and to be inclusive. And then we turn on the TV at night and we see some of the political leaders saying things that are just horrible and pointing fingers and shaming people. How are we to believe that this kindness business isn't a crock? And that's a hard one to answer, Howard. You're right. We're seeing some really bad behaviors from people who are very influential. And I think it's up to us to stand up to that and to call it out when we see it and say, this is not who we are, and to not succumb to behaving that way ourselves.
Two more words come to mind as you are presenting those insights and, experiences working with the high school students. One is faith as well. And I did write down hope again, but I realized we just talked about hope. There's a Jewish proverb. It's called tikkun olam. It essentially boils down to, you're not obligated to complete the task, but neither are you free to abandon it. And I believe this work of kindness, we have to ourselves and through our actions and our words commit to being kind, to offering kindness when it's so that it becomes natural for us, and to encourage, mentor, coach our teams, our companies, our organizations, our families to also put into practice those things that can be considered kind. And I think to answer the student's question is that we may not get to the finish line in our lifetime. Doesn't mean we can abandon the effort.
That's so true. That's so true. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is I think all kids, there's some pivotal historical event for me and maybe for you. It was the assassination of JFK. And then shortly after that, the assassinations of Robert Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King. Those really affected me as a young person and affected how I looked at the world and the world I wanted to see and changes I wanted. I think for our children and grandchildren right now, probably what we're going through in 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic, is going to be one of the stories they tell their children and grandchildren, something they remember all their lives. And how we respond to it as individuals and as a nation is going to be the story they tell. And sometimes I worry about what that story is going to be, what adults are modeling for kids.
I completely agree, and I would add that too to the political strife we have in this country. And what do we want historians to say about the United States of America? Because it's hard to believe in my mind how fragile our system truly was, and in 4 years we're at the place we are. But I think we still have to have hope and some faith, and to live those principles of kindness and look for opportunities whenever possible to make it a random act of kindness, or not even a random act, because I don't think random is good enough. It should be an act of kindness. Look for opportunities whenever possible that within our means we can offer kindness. So, Donna, it's been a very interesting conversation with you, and I'm so glad you were able to take the time to come on and talk to us about your work and about this, very timely topic and this importance of living a kind life. And if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
Probably my website, which is ayearoflivingkindly.com. And there's a contact me page that if anybody wants to get in touch directly, you can use that to email me. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about kindness and the world. I also have a Facebook author page and a Twitter account. That's probably the best way.
Sounds good. We will most definitely provide the backlinks to your website, ayearoflivingkindly.com, as well as your Facebook and Twitter social sites. And of course, we'll put a backlink to your book on, at least on the Amazon website as well. Just one more quick question. Are you continuing to have speaking engagements, albeit probably virtual, but are you finding that there is perhaps a groundswell for this message of kindness, and how do we go about making the change that we want to see?
Yeah, it has been really heartening. The book's been out almost 2 years now, and I'm still getting lots of requests for speaking engagements, whether it's meeting with book groups virtually. I was doing a lot of in-person conferences and speaking, but since March, a lot of those have moved to virtual. And I think this is going to be something that we'll be talking about for a long time. The outcome of the November election is not going to suddenly make the world kinder. We've got a lot of work to do to bring unity back to our country. And I think kindness is one of the strongest tools we can use to do that. It's going to be hard work, but I think we can do it if we all commit to it.
I completely agree there. So thank you so much. And to your continued success in your work, and in some ways, your evangelism about the importance of living kindly.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Howard. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Fantastic. All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Donna Cameron. She is the author of A Year of Living Kindly, Choices That Will Change Your Life and the World Around You. I don't know about you, but I think we've just kind of hit a nerve on a topic that is so incredibly important in the lives we are leading today. So many of the issues we are facing, whether it's the virus, whether it's the election behaviors, whether it's the various movements. I mean, we are at the edge of the cliff in some shape or fashion. And, just listening to Donna and hearing about her work and about this wonderful word, kindness, and how it's so important. And I think it's a tool that is so needed today. And perhaps it's one of the great tools that is at our disposal and so sorely needed that will keep us or allow us to take some steps back away from the edge of the cliff. So folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. Take care of yourselves, your family, your loved ones. Practice social distancing, wear your mask. Look for opportunities every day to offer kindness. Make it a choice that you every day are going to look for ways to offer kindness. Be kind to yourself, be kind to your friends and family, be kind out into the community. And we will see you on the next episode of the Success Insight Podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.